The pattern has a name in clinical literature: self-handicapping near success. It appears across populations, across cultures, across domains. Athletes who injure themselves in the week before the championship. Entrepreneurs who make a catastrophic decision the month before the company turns profitable. People in relationships who start a fight that ends everything just as the relationship reaches a depth they'd been pursuing for years. The sports psychology literature has a specific term for the championship version: choking under pressure. But choking is a performance failure under stress. The mechanism is different. What self-handicapping near success describes is not performance failure, but behavior change. The person doesn't fail to execute. They make a different decision. They don't show up. They create a new problem that supersedes the original challenge. The distinction matters because it points to the correct mechanism. Choking is a stress response. Self-handicapping near success is an identity response. The trigger isn't the pressure of the moment. It's the proximity of a reality that contradicts the internal model. The standard explanation is fear of success. That framing is accurate but incomplete. It describes the symptom without explaining the mechanism, why the brain generates something that looks functionally identical to fear when the thing you've been working toward is about to arrive. The mechanism is more specific and more interesting than fear. It's identity defense. Your brain maintains a model of who you are, not a conscious model, a working model embedded in the predictive systems that run your behavior automatically. That model was built from accumulated experience, from patterns of success and failure, from what the people around you reflected back. And like every predictive model, it resists updates that contradict it. When you're about to succeed at something that contradicts what the model says you are, the brain doesn't experience that as good news. It experiences it as a threat to the integrity of the model, and it responds accordingly. The research on this begins with a finding that seems obvious until you follow its implications. Carol Dweck's work on mindset, conducted across decades, replicated across dozens of populations, established that people hold implicit theories about their own abilities that function as identity statements, not just beliefs. Identity anchors. The person with a fixed mindset around intelligence, for example, doesn't just believe their intelligence is fixed. They have organized their self-concept around a particular level of performance. Success that exceeds what the model predicts is threatening in a specific way. It raises expectations. It invites a new level of performance as the baseline. It creates the possibility of future failure at a higher standard. The easier path, psychologically, is to not arrive at the new standard. To find a way, not consciously, not deliberately, to perform at the level the identity already accommodates. Dweck documented this in children with fixed mindsets who, given a choice between an easy problem they could definitely solve and a harder one that would teach them something, consistently chose the easy one, not because they were lazy, because the harder problem threatened the identity. A wrong answer at the higher level was more psychologically costly than a right answer at the lower one. The adult version is the sabotage that happens when the harder level is about to become your new baseline. Before the Dweck research, there was a clinical pattern documented in psychoanalytic literature that went under several names: success neurosis, victory depression, wrecked by success. The terminology wasn't unified, but the observation was consistent. Certain patients deteriorated, sometimes dramatically, precisely when they achieved what they'd been working toward. Freud noted it as early as 1916 in an essay titled "Those Wrecked by Success." He described patients who fell apart into depression, self-destructive behavior, relationship collapse, immediately following significant achievements. His explanation involved guilt, and the superego. The mechanism he proposed hasn't survived, but the pattern he documented has been confirmed repeatedly. What the contemporary research has added is a mechanistic account of why the pattern is so stable. It's not guilt and it's not a specific pathology. It's a general feature of how identity-maintaining systems respond to disconfirmation of their core predictions. Neuroscientist and psychiatrist Dan Siegel has written about what he calls the window of tolerance, the range of activation within which the nervous system can process information and respond flexibly. Outside that window, either above it or below it, the system shifts into defensive modes that prioritize stabilization over effective engagement. Success that arrives faster than the identity can integrate is a form of activation that exceeds the window. The nervous system, encountering a reality that doesn't match its model of who you are, generates a threat response, not to external danger, but to internal incoherence. The behavioral output of that threat response looks, from the outside, like self-sabotage, procrastination at the crucial moment, a fight started for no apparent reason, a decision made that everyone around you can see is wrong. What's happening internally is the nervous system doing exactly what it evolved to do, restoring coherence between internal model and external reality. It just does it by dragging reality back to the model rather than updating the model. Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance research in the 1950s established the foundational mechanism here. When people hold two cognitions that contradict each other, I am a person who fails and I am about to succeed, the psychological discomfort generated is real and motivating. It drives behavior aimed at reducing the contradiction. The most obvious resolution: update the identity. Accept that you are becoming someone who succeeds. This is the resolution that requires the most work and produces the most growth. The easier resolution: eliminate the contradicting cognition. Don't succeed. Find a way to make the imminent success not happen, so the contradiction disappears and the existing identity is preserved. Festinger documented this pattern across contexts. People consistently preferred reality distortion to identity revision. They would construct elaborate explanations, change their behavior, misremember outcomes, anything to maintain a coherent self-concept rather than update it. The person close to winning, who suddenly makes decisions that guarantee losing, isn't irrational. They're resolving dissonance. The method is destructive. The logic is impeccable. Ellen Langer's research on what she called mindlessness adds a layer that explains why the sabotage is so difficult to catch in the act. Langer documented that most human behavior operates on automatic, driven by scripts, categories, and habitual responses that were formed in the past and operate in the present without conscious review. The script for how I handle situations where I might succeed was written years ago, possibly in circumstances that no longer apply, and it runs without your awareness. The person who grew up in an environment where success was dangerous, where achievement invited punishment, envy, or abandonment, developed a script that treats proximity to success as a signal to create distance from it. That script doesn't update automatically when the environment changes. It runs based on the category "about to succeed," regardless of whether the current situation actually carries the same risks. This is why insight alone doesn't reliably prevent the sabotage. You can know the pattern intellectually, understand it completely, even predict it accurately in advance, and still find yourself having made the catastrophic decision before the conscious mind fully registered what was happening. The script ran faster than the awareness. The relationship version of this pattern is particularly well documented and particularly destructive. Attachment researchers have identified a pattern in people with anxious or avoidant attachment styles where proximity, the very intimacy they're pursuing, triggers defensive behaviors that create distance. The person who complains that they can never find someone who stays, who consistently ends relationships just as they deepen, who starts the fight that ends things just as something real is developing. The mechanism isn't ambivalence about the relationship. It's the threat response triggered by getting what they thought they wanted. Closeness at a sufficient depth activates the same homeostatic pull as success near a fixed identity boundary. The nervous system's model says, this isn't what relationships are for people like me. The behavior follows. Psychologist Sue Johnson, who developed emotionally focused therapy, has documented this cycle in clinical populations and normal couples alike. The attachment system that's supposed to produce bonding instead generates attack or withdrawal at the moment of greatest potential intimacy, not because the person doesn't want connection, but because connection at that depth exceeds what the internal model says is available to them. They destroy it to restore coherence. The relationship ends. The model is confirmed. The cycle continues. Ellen Langer's research on what she called mindlessness adds a layer that explains why the sabotage is so difficult to catch in the act. The failure identity isn't simply pessimism. It's a self-concept organized around not succeeding, built through enough repeated failure, enough environmental reinforcement of a particular narrative that success genuinely feels like a violation of who you are, not just unlikely, wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. Research by William Swann on self-verification. The tendency to seek feedback that confirms existing self-beliefs, even when those beliefs are negative, established something counterintuitive. People with negative self-concepts don't just accept negative feedback more easily, they actively prefer it. Given a choice between a partner who sees them positively and one who sees them accurately in the negative terms they see themselves, they prefer the latter. Why? Because confirmation of the self-concept, even a negative one, is more comfortable than the disorientation of being seen as someone you don't recognize. The person with a failure identity who is about to succeed is approaching a moment where they will be seen, by themselves and others, as someone they fundamentally don't recognize. The brain's resolution isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just the accumulation of small decisions, each individually defensible, that collectively produce the familiar outcome. The intervention that research suggests actually works isn't motivation. It isn't willpower. It isn't deeper commitment to the goal. It's identity revision at the pace the nervous system can integrate. Dweck's growth mindset interventions don't produce change by convincing people they're capable. They produce change by slowly shifting the identity anchor, by accumulating enough evidence of a different kind of person that the model updates, and the threat response when approaching that new level of performance diminishes. The clinical work on self-verification shows a similar path. Change requires not just behavioral evidence, but sufficient repetition of that evidence for the self-concept to begin incorporating it. Single instances of success don't update the model. Patterns of success, sustained long enough, eventually do. The window between I'm someone who fails and I'm someone who succeeds is where the sabotage is most likely. Not because the person lacks commitment, because the identity is updating and the threat response is most acute during the transition. What the research converges on, from Dweck, from Swann, from attachment theory, from Siegel's window of tolerance, is a picture of the sabotage as a systems problem, not a character problem. The system isn't broken, it's doing its job. Its job is to maintain coherence between your internal model of who you are and the external reality you inhabit. When those two come into conflict, the system intervenes. The intervention happens at the behavioral level. It produces actions that bring the external reality back into alignment with the internal model. The problem isn't the system. The problem is that the model is outdated. It was calibrated to an earlier version of your circumstances, an earlier chapter of what was possible, and it hasn't updated to reflect what's actually available now. Changing the behavior without changing the model doesn't work. The new behavior contradicts the model, the threat response activates, the sabotage finds another route. This is why willpower-based approaches to this pattern fail with such reliable regularity. You can override the system once. You can't override it indefinitely. The model eventually wins. What does work across the research is the slow accumulation of identity disconfirming experience at a pace the nervous system can integrate. Not dramatic transformation, repeated exposure to a different kind of outcome, sustained long enough until the model begins to update. Dweck's mindset interventions work on this timeline. Therapy that targets the attachment model works on this timeline. The neurological change is real and measurable, but it's slow. It requires more patience than most people extend to themselves, and more compassion for the sabotage when it happens. Because the sabotage isn't evidence of weakness. It's evidence of a system working exactly as designed, defending a model that no longer serves you. The most precise summary of the mechanism is this: you don't sabotage because you want to fail. You sabotage because your nervous system has been trained to treat a particular level of performance as home and anything above it as foreign territory. The drive back toward home isn't weakness. It's the same homeostatic mechanism that keeps your body temperature stable, that pulls your sleep patterns toward their established rhythm, that makes the first week of any new habit the hardest. Psychological homeostasis is not a metaphor. It's a functional description of how identity-maintaining systems operate. The system doesn't evaluate whether the home it's defending is good. It defends coherence. It restores the known. The work of changing this isn't motivational. It's architectural. It's the slow, unglamorous process of building enough evidence that a different identity is actually yours, so that the nervous system's model of who you are eventually includes the person who gets to win. Until that update completes, the sabotage will keep finding a way, because the system is working exactly as it was designed to. Thank you so much for getting this far. It's a great pleasure to have you following our content. And if this made sense to you, or if it helped you see things from a different perspective, please consider subscribing to the channel. It means a lot to us. I'll see you in the next video.